These are the 8 big lessons I learned before becoming a millionaire before the age of 40. And then the same lessons that I kept hammering home for the next year when we 5x'd my value, my wife and I, over the next year. And one of the big factors is that over time, as we continuously grew from the time I was 25 until 40, my wife and I really had no idea what we were doing. We just knew that we had to figure out how to make more money than we were spending. We went through various hardships prior to Corona, prior to the Ronavirus. We were about to go bankrupt, but fortunately the PPP loans came in and we had been setting things up. Lo and behold, that later on would end up being extremely successful for us long term. So some of the big factors, and these are videos I'm going to put together to help me understand my own financial situation, and hopefully somebody else watching can help then understand their own financial situation. Number one, okay, the first big factor was that I was working 50 to 70 hours every single week. And the big factor with that is that this goes into the number 4 aspect, is that I had passion outside of money. Okay, so I knew 2 big things. I had to work a lot, okay, and I had a passion outside of money. I knew that based off of my companies, okay, that I had started, I had began 3 different companies based off of passion. Okay, so when I was able to work 50 plus hours a week, it was because I was striving towards something that I was very passionate about. So when that ended up happening, one, it helped me understand the business world a little bit quicker than I otherwise would have if I was only working 40 hours a week. And 2, it helped me just stay focused on the path of developing a business, of developing a company, of developing multiple companies. Okay, so the biggest privilege that I had there was that I initially, at a very young age, at the age of 24, found something that I was passionate about. I was motivated by my parents. And when we took that, I took that deep passion, okay, and I just ran with it and just kept going. Now, when I look back, okay, from the time I was 24 until the time I was 35, I had no idea what I was doing financially. All I knew was that I wanted to be the absolute best that I could possibly be at those specific jobs. So if I was going to be the best that I could possibly be, I had to work all of the time. And if I had to work all the time, then I'm just going to be really good at what I'm passionate about. And then that led me into the second big lesson. And the second big lesson is that we saved a lot of money. Okay, everything came back to if I'm trying to grow businesses, okay, and in my case, I was trying to grow a business that was actually on my property, on my house, at my house. I had to save as much money as possible. Now, I learned early on from my grandmother, who had a husband who had left her very, very early in her life. She has 4 kids, okay? She passed away recently. She had 4 children, but she taught me at a very young age to use an envelope method. Okay, so you could just put in a certain amount, a certain percentage of your dollars into these specific envelopes. Whether or not that's what you're gonna do, that's how I ended up saving money. And then I'm going to look for this really quickly, is that we ended up using this. Okay, and I'm going to bring this in as a real cool memorabilia here, is that I ran a company entirely for about 7 years where people would pay me in a Monopoly tin. And so what I ended up doing is that I would come home from this Monopoly, I would come home from work and I would go with the Monopoly tin and I would start moving my money around into these specific envelopes. And then at the end of the week, every Friday, I would drive to the bank and I would put it into the bank. So I saw this tangible dollars, okay? I saw these tangible dollars. And because of that, I wanted to save as well as I possibly could. And I would look back and I'd say, okay, I'm passionate about these things in my life. I want to keep rolling with the business here. And if I continuously save my money, okay, I'm going to be able to spend more money on things I'm passionate about. And ultimately, in the back of my head, I just felt like everything would come to fruition at some point in my life. I didn't know when, but I just knew that if I was saving money, if I was making more money than I was spending, okay, so I'm saving money, I'm using the envelope method, I've got the Monopoly tin, I've got that passion, I could work towards whatever that specific goal would be. And that led to the third big aspect, which is I was cheap. Okay, I still tend to be cheap. Okay, I still recognize that if I'm going to make a decision on buying something, I have to rank this process. I have to go through like, do I really need this or can I just get away with buying this? do I really need this, or do I get away with buying this? And then now I'm at this point where I can prioritize what I want to spend my money on while still being relatively cheap. Okay, so I knew that if I was frugal with things and if I was recognizing where I could cut corners with costs, that in turn would help me spend less money. And if I made more money than I was spending, I could save more money. And ultimately, if I was working more hours, I would continuously make even more money and ideally become better at my job, better at my task, better at becoming a business person, which over a long period of time would just continuously grow. And it really is, I believe, that simple. If we look at it and say, okay, if I can make more money than I'm spending, and if I can work harder or work more, then I will, one, spend less because I'm working more. Two, I will make more money also from that. Three, I want to go into saving money, and now you're recognizing that you're working harder, you feel better about yourself. So then you don't want to just blow your money on stupid things. That leads to being a little bit more cheap, and over a long period of time, that's going to help you develop. Now, that leads back into that fourth aspect that I mentioned earlier, which was having a passion for something. Okay, I think oftentimes a lot of get-rich-quick schemers, a lot of pyramid schemers, a lot of the individuals selling Amway, a lot of people along those lines, buying meme coins, things like that, they aren't passionate about anything outside of money because they look at money as something that's going to resolve whatever their problems are in life. They look at money as they're not happy with what they're doing on a regular basis, and so hopefully the money will make them happier. Okay, so they're recognizing that they have this, unhappy state, and the only thing that they think can resolve this is paying off all their bills because that's a pain point. And yes, that can alleviate a massive amount of stress. But if you're not passionate about anything, you're never truly going to figure out what will make you happy. And ultimately, that's all that matters, right? We're trying to make as much money as possible so that we're happy. And in all reality, the passion is really, if we stay focused, all that matters to being happy. One thing for me is that as I've had success and as I've made financial gains and I've become financially stable and I've been able to do things that I want to do from a financial perspective, I haven't changed what I'm doing on a daily basis. I'm still doing the same things because I love it. I love to do it. I want to be the best at it. I want to conquer everything I can possibly conquer. And I think some of this goes into embracing that struggle, and that actually leads into this fifth key concept. So if we look at the first concept is work 50 to 70 hours a week, okay? The second concept would be save a lot of money, meaning spend less money than you're making, okay? Third one, be cheap. Figure out where you can cut corners. Fourth one, have a passion outside of that so working a lot of hours doesn't beat you down. If you're really passionate about something, you can work more and it's not going to frustrate you. Now, this leads into, the fifth one. I think it sort of piggybacks on being cheap. So we have lived in an 880 square foot house for 13 years. Okay, my wife and I and our 4 children. We have driven the same cars for 10 years. Okay, we have chosen to make very specific decisions. One, because we knew we could save money, and two, we knew that when we did not have money, it really is what saved us. Okay, so prior to Rona, we were on the verge of going bankrupt because we were putting so much money into specific companies, and the only way we could heat our house is because we have a fireplace. Okay, we have a wood stove. Not a fireplace, a wood stove. And so we heat our house with that wood stove. We still heat our house with that wood stove. And I estimate over the last 20 years, we have probably saved upwards of $20,000 on our heating bill just by heating with firewood. Okay, and on top of that, then you can look at it and say, all right, well, I've spent time with my children splitting firewood. I've been able to teach my kids lessons on moving firewood in and out. So that's like another double whammy, right? So now we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, if we're going to be cheap, we're also going to make sacrifices, and I want to heat the entire house with firewood. Well, then the next thing, well, we live in a small house, so it makes it a lot easier to heat the house with firewood. Well, we live in a small house, so now our electric bill is much lower. Well, we have some, land that we bought when we didn't have a lot of money. Okay, we bought this land by making a unique exchange with an individual. We bought 25 acres, and when we purchased the 25 acres, we basically purchased the 25 acres with a guy that came with the property, because we ended up buying it at 2/3 the cost when we bought it with this individual. So we went through these unique situations. We made sacrifices. We ended up burning firewood, having a very small house, having very low electric bills, having those low heating bills, raising our own food, having chickens, having pigs, having ducks, having geese, and doing this year over year over year. And then at the same time, working 50 to 70 hours a week because we're passionate about this, and then saving as much money along the way as possible. And then in turn, driving the same cars for as long as possible. Okay. Not blasting money on things that you don't necessarily need. Okay. Now the next thing, this is the number 6, is that minimizing debt. Okay. Minimizing debt is an absolutely huge way to, one, make more money than you're spending. Okay. It always comes back to this. If we're going to be investing in stocks, you've got to have a surplus of cash to invest in stocks. Okay. If we're going to build a retirement fund, we have to have more money than we're spending, right? It's this continuous thing. So if we're looking at this and we recognize that we want to minimize debt, okay, that's going to help go a long way. And I knew early on, I had seen my parents struggle a lot with finances, but I was privileged enough that I had my dad's parents were very successful. They're a little quirky, so I feel like my dad never really truly followed with their habits and their the way that they went about saving money. My grandmother saved a ton of money, and she was a single parent to 4 children and worked all of the time. And so what ended up happening is that I recognized at a very early age, my parents had almost a $30,000 credit card debt. And I remember saying to myself, I'm never going to get a credit card. Okay. And I had no idea why I felt that way, outside of the fact that I had seen my mom really upset because they couldn't pay their credit card bills. Okay. So what I ended up doing was that I decided I'm not going to have a credit card. And then, later I do have a credit card now, but for about 15 years, I never got a credit card, because all I did was I would buy my cell phone in cash. I would pay my cell phone bill consistently. My utility bills, I would always pay ahead of time. My rent or my mortgage, all those things. So the only debt I really had was to take out mortgages on our house. Okay. So that was a huge step for us, was to take out just that mortgage. And I had saved so much money that each time that I would take out a mortgage, I would just resave a lot of money. And I would do it again. I resave as much money as possible. I would do it again. And so minimizing debt was a very, very huge step. Looking back now, that I'm really happy I did. I'm not saying that you should not ever have credit cards, because I think there's a benefit to having credit cards once you have money. But I think it's a really important way that you can learn for like 5 to 10 years to establish, if you don't have a credit card, to establish then like, okay, I make this much, I'm only spending this much. It's a little bit easier to hold yourself accountable when you don't have that credit card as that way to sort of step forward. Now, this next thing, number 7. Drive beater vehicles. Okay, I spent a notorious amount of time on Craigslist. I spent a notorious amount of time looking for rundown, beat down cars that I could buy for $500 to $1,500 growing up, and I would drive them for about a year until they died. I would try to save up money so that I could get them fixed to the point of making them drivable, and then I would do that consistently, and I would just use that as my car payment, essentially. Is that I would just try and find a car And I would look at, okay, Honda Element from the mid 2000s, they were notorious for being reliable and having good longevity. So I would try and find one very cheap. I would get it fixed up, and then I would drive that for 5 years. My wife would drive that for 5 years. A Volkswagen TDI Passat, great on fuel, 50 to 55 miles per gallon on diesel. We had one for 3 years and we bought it for $3,000 and we didn't put anything into it. And then when we sold it for the same amount of price. Okay, so we would constantly look on these forums to see what's a really good car to drive, what's a reliable car that we could find at a low price, and just continuously drive that basically into the ground. And then that led us to the point where we are now, where 10 years ago, we each got a car, okay, a used vehicle, very nice, very stable vehicles, and we're still driving them today. Each of them has over 200,000 miles on them. So we consistently drove beater vehicles. Now, the cars are getting older and they have let us down at certain points, so we've had to get them towed. That has happened. But because we've saved so much money along the way, we are able to handle those small headaches at different points because we've made those sacrifices. And we've been made fun of by people. We've, playfully made fun of by people who will say like, well, hey, maybe if you drove a nicer car, that wouldn't happen. But at the same time, I've made these sacrifices. My wife and I have made these sacrifices that now I'm seeing if I continue to sacrifice certain things, we can continue to grow financially and to help get us into a better spot. And then finally, the big thing, number 8 here, is that we bought that cheap land. And I mentioned how we bought that. Basically, we were buying this from an estate. There was 3 siblings in the estate. 2 of the siblings wanted money. The third one wanted to stay there. So we paid those 2 siblings off and the third guy got to stay. And we have enough land that it ended up being great. It's a great situation. And so I always say one of the factors for me was that I'm very good at finding unique scenarios to sort of just take advantage of those scenarios so that we can benefit from them financially long term. And because we have more land, we could have firewood, and we could have a place that we can process firewood, and then we could heat our house. And then we have these lower bills, as I mentioned. And I think that out of these 8, if we look at it, 1, you have to work 50 to 70 hours a week and do that for 10 to 20 years. And a lot of people will say like, well, then, you're not happy. Well, you're happy if you do number 4, which is find passion outside of making money. But the other aspect is that we knew that if we put in this sacrifice, we could get ourselves into a situation that by the time we're 40, we'll be pretty stable. We didn't know if it would actually happen, but we were sort of confident like it would pay off. Okay, and then that second aspect is save a lot of money. Use the envelope, use the Monopoly bin as an example. Third one, be cheap. Okay, don't spend tons and tons of cash. Be very aware of what you're spending your money on. Fourth one, as we mentioned, have passion outside of just making money. Fifth one, make sure you're making decisions like how can we cheapify living? Okay, if we can have firewood or raise our own food or have a garden, those things pay off a long ways. The 6th one, minimize debt. The 7th one, drive beater vehicles. The 8th one, find cheap land if you can. That was a huge one for us, that once we found that cheap land, and I'm going to use this as one final example, is that cheap land then enabled us as we maintained the property for about 10 years, 5 to 10 years, it got us in position that we could then have equity in other properties that we could then invest in. And really the biggest factor that I want to bring home is that we have bought a house. Okay, we bought a house in 2011 and we saved up so much money that when this land came available, we had enough money that we could keep the original house and just open up a new mortgage and put the money down and live in this new house. And we fixed the house up in cash while we rented out our other house and we lived at my parents' house. So we made these sacrifices along the way, which then enabled us to get to this point of where before the age of 40, I was worth over $1 million. Before the age of 41, that had 5x because of these decisions. And they just continuously compounded. So these are stories that I'm thinking through to help myself understand the financial decisions that I'm going to be making with my wife as we move forward. I hope this helped you guys. Stay tuned to more videos about finances and where you guys can go to save that money. Peace.